No,
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get this started. It's 4:05. Welcome to Chatting with Catalina. This week, our special guest is Master Grimwulf. I've been doing for the past 3 weeks having a chat with somebody who is well known for a specific art. I plan on having different ones for people who do services or have something that they're known for in the SCA or something that is outstanding or that other people might want to learn about. And we chat about their history, their life in the SCA, and how they came to know their art, service, or path, their whole journey. So today we have Master Grimwulf. Before we start, I'm going to ask you guys to all put yourself on mute. We will have question and answer sessions, and when we get to those, you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask your questions. You could also put your questions in chat, or you can, if you're watching via Facebook Live, you can also put your questions in the comments section on the Facebook Live. All right, so Master Grimwulf, will you introduce yourself to us?
Hi, everybody. My name is Grimwulf Harland. I live in the Barony of Three Rivers, and I've been here, oh my goodness, I've been in Three Rivers since June of 2005. I moved to Calontir in January of 1999, and before that, I had 6 years in Meridies. I'm kind of bleeding over into Catalina's next question, and I apologize for that.
So you stayed in Meridies before you moved to Calontir?
That's true. I got my start in Birmingham, Alabama, the Barony of Iron Mountain, which you can tell from my very deep South drawl that I'm clearly a Southern boy living as a participant observer among the Northern peoples.
So when did you join the SCA?
I joined in April of 1993, directly after attending a demonstration at my high school. But that's not where I first heard about the SCA. I first heard about the SCA in an incredibly nerdy way, and I've just recently unearthed this. This is the official guide to Ultima, which was a computer game. I got Ultima 5 in 1988, and Ultima 6 came out in 1990. And there's just a little one or two paragraph blurb inside the book saying how the programmer of the game got started in Anstiora in college with his fencing club. And I thought, wow, that sounds really amazing. Getting to play with swords and do medieval things.
So the programmer of the game, is that what that book is? A game?
So the programmer of the game, Richard Garriott, is kind of a big deal in Texas. He has a giant mansion that he had built that has a bunch of secret chambers in it. He opens it up every Halloween for neighborhood kids to go running through his house. And he's the son of an astronaut. So he had a very interesting childhood and had a couple things go up in the space shuttle and all that kind of stuff. He picked his name while accidentally misreading the name of his gear shift on his 10-speed bicycle, Shimano. He misread it as Shimino. He did some research, found out that was a medieval French name, and so that's how he's known in Anstiora. So I found out about the SCA 3 years before I found it, because between 1990 and 1991, the internet didn't really exist. I was very young. I didn't have a car. I thought, well, this is something he did in college. Maybe you have to be 18 or 21 to join. I don't know. And the fact that I was like 15 or 16 years old and had no motivation whatsoever meant that I just filed in the back of my head. So when I was 18, in my senior year in high school, and the Barony of Iron Mountain was going to do a demo for my high school. I snapped up and suddenly was paying attention in English class because they said I could get extra credit for attending this demo on a Thursday night in April. I think it was the 23rd. I'd have to go back. It was the 21st or the 23rd of April, 1993.
That's a pretty good memory.
What else was I doing with my life? I went from being an unathletic, nerdy kid to being an unathletic, nerdy metalsmith, basically overnight. Although I didn't get into metalsmithing until I left Iron Mountain and moved to Gray Niche, which is Memphis, Tennessee, and enrolled in the Memphis College of Art. And that's where I got into all the metalsmithing ever. So I had a very formal education at a private liberal arts college where I learned anything and everything that I could about metalsmithing.
So before you started metalsmithing, when you first joined, how did you settle on your persona? Have you always been known as Grimwulf?
I have been known as Grimwulf since roughly October of 1993. There were two young ladies who were reading out of books of English names. That was in October of 93, and I also remember that there was in Gray Niche at one of the, I think we had populist meetings on Tuesday nights, but it's been a minute. But it was held at Rhodes College, and Mistress Shannon and Dame Brenna, before Brenna had been elevated, a couple of Pelicans who were all heraldically minded, had a heraldic consultation where they brought all these books, and I mentioned that I wanted to have an English name because what could I possibly be other than English? I'm a white boy. That is who I am. And I didn't really think that I really had any business trying a funny accent or doing anything that wouldn't seem believable. So before she was a Lady Eleanor and another young woman by the name of Anise were reading through the books and just spouting out names toward me, and they were all terrible and adorable and would have been perfect for a young man who never got any older than 18 years old, like Dibble. Eleanor specifically wanted to name me Dibble Darling because that was a perfectly documentable English name. But they were going through the names, all terrible things, and then they got to Grimwulf, and I said, hey, I like that. That's a pretty good name. I went through and found a by name and submitted it to the College Heralds as soon as possible, drew up some arms, and I've been Grimwulf since October of 1993. I've now been Grimwulf longer than I haven't been.
Wow.
Because I've been in the SCA for 27 years now, and I was only 18 when I joined, even though I still look like I'm in my late 20s.
So tell us a little bit about your very first event.
My very first event was Black Axe 15, again in Iron Mountain. So it was at some little state park in the middle of nowhere, Alabama, somewhere near Birmingham. And it was like nothing I'd ever seen before in my life. Everyone is dressed up in funny clothes. There's pomp and circumstance. So that was in May of 1993. I took my very best friend, Brian King, with me in my 81 Toyota Corolla, and we drove off in search of adventure and whatever. I had to wear loner garb because I had just found the SCA, gone to a couple meetings, and wanted to go to an event as soon as possible. So I talked with the person in charge of loner garb, and the only thing that fit me, because I don't know, for those of you who don't know who I am a tiny little man. I am absolutely small, very, very small person. So the only thing that fit me was a kind of like a hospitaler's surcoat. So it's this giant white surcoat that has an enormous red cross across the front of it and across the back, which is like as far as Grimwulf as you can possibly get. I had an old leather belt, and I borrowed my dad's sandals that were left over from the 60s, where the bottom was made out of tire treads, because that's medieval, right? What the hell?
Totally.
So completely embarrassing, ridiculous to behold. The first thing that I gravitated to in the SCA was not art, was not science, and wasn't even fighting, it was dancing. I got into SCA dancing in a huge way, even though I never really learned the steps well enough. I could only follow along if someone else was calling them in the first several months. So it was amazing. Now, Meridies only has tournament fighting. They don't do melees. It's like the exact opposite of Calontir. But it was still amazing to watch the tournaments and cheer on all the fighters, and go to a feast and go to a court and all that amazing stuff. And I was hooked.
Kind of what happens to all of us, that first event.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, I'm going to take a little pause, see if anybody has any questions or comments about Grimwulf's early life in the SCA. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your questions.
Hey, Grimwulf.
Hi, Eleanor.
I had completely forgotten about Dibble. I hadn't forgotten about Darling. I thought we'd name you Grimwulf Darling. But I'd forgotten about Dibble Darling. So I appreciate that particular little memory. Because I do remember a niece of Carnarvonshire and I sitting there going through the books trying to name you.
I have an amazing superpower to remember and name details that will help me out in no other conceivable way.
Absolutely. So I remember you bicycling to Rhodes from the Memphis College of Art to get to those meetings too.
That's true. Actually, everyone will appreciate this. My first semester of art school, my parents were not letting me have a car. I had no way to get to the meetings or the fighter practices any other way than I could walk or bicycle to the meetings, but fighter practice was like 6 or 7 miles from my house. So I was constantly having to beg for rides. And most of the people who would take pity on me were young women. So everyone in the student housing where I lived thought that I was some kind of player. And one student in particular, I was 18, he was 28, he was from, I can't remember if he was from Ghana, he was from somewhere in Africa, and his name was Muzwandele. Everyone in his village called him Wanda. He went by Muzi, only in the States, because the Americans told him, we are not going to call you Wanda, because that's a woman's name. So, okay, wow, all right. But there was one day that Muzi said, so man, you a player? No, this is just someone giving me a ride. It's a different girl from last night. I know, but it's not what you think. There's absolutely nothing happening.
That's pretty funny. That's pretty funny. Any other questions right now as we move forward? All right, so let's go ahead and start talking about your journey into metalworking. So when did you start working with metal? You said a little bit about school.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it would be August of 1993. I accidentally took an intro to metals at the Memphis College of Art. I had one elective, And I thought, well, I'm in the SCA now, have been for 5 months. So I'll make myself some armor and I'll make myself a sword. That's not what happened in my first semester of metalsmithing class. Instead, we worked very slowly with only jewelry metals on a very small scale to start off with. Now, Eleanor did say that she was trying to find something. I am a sentimental young coot. So I do have a lot of things from the old days, and what I have is an original sketchbook. And so this one is what I ended up doing for my first piece. It was a bimetal disc where I cut this out with little jeweler saws and drills and stuff. This little swan was the art that I used for a little brooch for Eleanor. That was the first time that I drew my arms. The only thing that it would have is the owl should be green and not white. And then this was something that I made. It was a sun and splendor for a little badge that I made for a very young Amber, who is now married to Alanon, and I think they're in Arizona or something like that now.
Yeah, they moved to Atenveld, I believe.
Yeah, yeah.
That's correct.
I made that for her to give to some guy, and we all know how that goes.
So your first work was pierce work? That's what you started with?
My first work was pierce work and soldering. And that was a great place to start. And so I was sitting there drilling my little holes and sawing away and looking left and right and hearing all the other kids breaking their saw blades. And I'm thinking, this is easy. This makes sense to me. And that jumping into it and it clicking immediately and thinking, okay, this might be something. I might not have to learn to not hate painting. So I still hate painting to this day. Paint and I don't play well together.
So, hold on. Okay, here we go. We got ahead. So when did you start doing Repousse then?
So I started Repousse in 1994, either my second or third semester of school. I was not able to find the illustration for my first Repousse piece. And I have not put that on my personal webpage. It is somewhere on my Book of Face in one of the galleries, and I can happily dredge up an image. There was a man in Greynish by the name of Connor O'Swerd who said he would teach me leatherworking if I made a metal piece for him. So my very first piece was a brooch, probably about that big or so, that looks a lot like the Dodge Ram logo in yellow brass. And then it has a giant fibula on the back to use it as a clasp. And so it was absolutely...
what did you think of as you were making it, how did you feel about it while you were putting it together? Since it was your first Repousse piece.
The first piece, it felt amazing because it was the first thing I made that really felt like it was not really permanent, but it felt like something real. It wasn't just me drawing something on a sketchbook in pencil and ink. It was making something physical. And especially the sculpting process of taking a flat sheet and then turning it into this bas relief was just amazing. It was like nothing I'd ever done before. And I was completely hooked. I probably split that piece about 20 times. And so it was soldered all over the place.
So explain that for those who don't know why you would solder something that split.
Okay, so with Repousse, you're setting the flat metal into a bed of molten pitch. And so if you are heating up the pitch and then putting your metal back onto the pitch, if you have any kind of a rent or a tear, it's just going to ooze all the way onto your piece, and that's no good. You can't do that. So even if you are going to ultimately have some kind of open work in your repousse, until you're done with the pitch work, it has to be, you can't have any holes, because if it isn't watertight, it's not going to be pitch tight, and then you'll end up basically almost riveting it with a pitch glob onto your pitch, and that will just be terrible.
So how did you get started? Like this first piece, what tools did you put together to get that particular one started? What did you work with the first time?
For the very first piece, so first of all, I went through the entire course of what I was supposed to do for Intro to Metals in about the first 5 weeks, because I would go into class and work and work and work, and then I'd finish my project, I'd start on something else, I'd ask, what is the next thing? I'd come in at night, I'd work on extra projects, and then I got through the entire semester worth of work and said, okay, what else can I learn? I want to learn. And my professor said, well, maybe you'd have fun with chasing a repousse. So my metalsmith professor, Richard Prilliman, has this amazing set of punches that he's made throughout the years. And they're all rolled into a giant leather roll. All of his punches were ground and hardened by hand with torches. And so that's all I knew, was to do all the grinding with like a sander and some files, heat it to harden and temper with a torch, and then quench it in like a little tin can of oil. I do it completely differently now, so that I can mass produce them and get better, more consistent results. But he showed me his personal tools and said, don't look at, so with a pen here, he said, don't look at this end, look at this end, and where all the tools are mushroomed and completely upset, copy those tools, because those are ones that I reach for every single time. Sure enough, the tools that I copied were what eventually became my 1 through 6 punches that I use for my basic repousse set. I reach for those shapes every single time I make anything. And sure, he had over 100 individual punches that all did something different, but there were some of them that you reach for every time. And so that's what I copied. I didn't have a bowl of pitch. We had these pieces of 2x4 with pitch that had just been poured onto them at some point. And then we would put the 2x4 with pitch in it on a sandbag. And the sandbag that I learned on, much like Darth Vader was almost more machine than man, this sandbag was almost more duct tape than sandbag. It had just been repaired hundreds of times with old duct tape. Torn through. It was just a tiny little, probably maybe 3 to 5 pound sandbag, military issue. Like, it's just this olive drab green.
This is funny, because you started talking about your professor said, hey, maybe you should try this. And I was like, oh, he's probably going to have like all of these fancy tools that he got to work with the first time. Nope. And no, here you are telling me you got a duct tape sandbag, a 2x4, some pitch thrown on top.
Yeah, it was make all your own tools, because the ones that you can buy from the store, even the places like Rio Grande at the time, 27 years ago, 26 when I started repousse, everything that you could buy was basically just a glorified leather punch. Everything had really sharp corners, and so it's not good for anything that just stamping and moving and stamping and moving. And repousse is more of a liquid type of movement. It's more like engraving, except you're not removing material, you're just pushing it someplace else. So yes, I was told day one of repousse training, you will make all your own punches because you can't buy them. So look at mine, see what I've done, and go from there. And so, yeah, now I've got over 100 different punches but there's only like 10 or 12 of them that I use all the time.
So in the beginning, what were some of the mistakes you made when you were first getting started?
Wow. So mistake is such a strong word because mistakes are how we learn. What I found out early on is how far I could push the metal before I would split it, and how in what direction I could push the metal before it would thin out, or which way I could push it so that it would get thicker. Mostly it was just finding out what the working properties were and what the limitations were. So I would say the only really big mistake that I made, as far as that goes, that wasn't a correctable thing, was when I tried to make my first piece in silver and I wasn't annealing it properly, and I was overheating it and quenching it too soon, and that caused the entire crystalline structure to basically become brittle, and then I just started cracking it. I didn't even get to repousse because while I was raising it, I took a flat disc and started hammering it into a vessel form. I didn't even get halfway through my initial shape because I just started cracking it. And my professor would refer to this as over annealing, because he also had his complete metalsmithing background from SIU Carbondale in the late 60s and early 70s. And so he was learning from a fellow by the name of Brent Kington, who was mostly a blacksmith, who pretty much just said, you know, let's figure how to do metalsmithing again. Because in the 60s, it had been completely forgotten by and large, and had to be rediscovered from books, and just from trial and error. So everything, I was given the benefit of basically a first generation chasing repousse artist saying, this is my approach, this is what to look for, and this is what to look out for. Read some books, but really it's just a matter of sitting down and physically taking the punch to the whatever it is that you're hitting, usually copper or brass, and just getting used to it and finding out what you can and cannot do.
You know, I asked that question, what mistakes did you make in the beginning? Because I also see mistakes as learning experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's talking about the things that you learned from, it helps with growth. So, and it's always good to let others know that even masters made mistakes or learning experiences at one point in time. So what were some of your early successes?
You know, everything felt like a success early on because I'd never seen anything like it. I hadn't studied any kind of metalsmithing early on, so I had no expectations. I didn't know what to think of me. Oh, lecturing makes my voice get all dried out.
Oh, you're doing all the talking.
I am. So, I mean, even when something felt like a complete failure to me, I would keep working it and try to get something out of it. So my first probably 4 or 5 years, nothing ever looked like what I had drawn as my working drawings of this is what I plan to do. I would have to make revisions throughout the process and say, here's what it is today. And then, ooh, this is a better idea than what I thought of previously. So I'll try this instead, because what I tried is just not working.
Oh, I've done that.
Absolutely. So I would say for the first 5 or 6 years of being a metalsmith, it never looked like what I wanted it to look like. After that point, I don't know if it was that I learned innately what the working properties were of my materials, I no longer know how much of my design is directly influenced by the constraints that I know that I can keep, and how much of it is that I can do what I set out to do because I know my materials. This is very similar to the, how do I know where Grimwulf ends and the Laurel begins? Because at this point, I don't know if I'm a Laurel because of what I do, or I do what I do because I'm a Laurel. It's this Ouroboros snake eating its own tail kind of situation where I don't know anymore, other than this is how it works now.
So speaking of being a Laurel, and where Grimwulf ends and being a Laurel begins, and all of the things that come with that, let's talk a little bit about when you started teaching Repousse. So when did you start? When did you teach your first class?
I taught my first class after I moved to, now actually had some notes here. Maybe we haven't gotten there yet. So I'll just go ahead. So I started off in Iron Mountain, and then I moved to Greynish. And then the whole reason I moved to Calontir is because the first job that I had out of school, working in a bassoon repair shop, which was amazing, and a completely different tangent. I've tried to always have a profession that has something to do with metal, whether it was working for a jewelry supply store, working as a bench jeweler, or working in bassoon repair, working on all the keys. But my boss was going to move to Nashville. And again, this was 1998. I was not going to follow him to Nashville for $7.50 an hour. Wasn't going to do it. So I thought, well, maybe it's time for grad school. I didn't look very many places. For the sake of my education, if I had it to do over again, I would have looked more seriously at the University of Athens in Georgia under Gary Nofke. Instead, I went to Kansas State University in Manhattan, the Little Apple, Kansas, Shire of Spinning Winds, where I studied with Elliot Pujol, who had been the graduate contemporary with my undergraduate metal professor. Richard Prilliman and Elliot Pujol had done work together at SIU Carbondale, and they'd worked on some fun things, like where they would take dynamite and blasting caps and farm things that they'd found out in a field. They would stack up all these old gears and other broken bits of machinery. They'd put down a sheet of copper, and we're talking, my arms aren't big enough to show the scale that they were working on, because they were like making pieces that were like 5 and 6 feet in each dimension. They would load up some corn cobs and some bladders of water, have dynamite and blasting caps on top of that, and then they'd set off the charge. Boom, the water behind the charge would hit the copper and instantly form it to all the old farm gears and other pieces of machinery, universal joints and whatever else they had for like instant repousse. And it's like, that's pretty freaking cool.
Huh.
So
I've never heard of that.
No, you know, one of the things that happens when your father is a mortician and has a farm and a couple other side businesses and has a bunch of dynamite and blasting caps laying around and says, hey, you know, go out to the field and blow some stumps up for me, boy. And
okay,
so
okay, Dad, sure.
Yeah. So I thought that studying at K-State would be amazing, and it just wasn't, because Elliot is a conceptual artist, and so in his mind, the idea of the piece was more important than the piece itself, and I am completely a hands-on, process-oriented person. I am more interested in making the thing almost more important than what the end result is. I like the end result, but for me, it's how it gets made and how I physically invest myself in it that's important to me. So we did not get along at all. It was a terrible situation. So I stayed for one semester. I will not go into it further other than I decided, okay, I want to learn how to run a mill and a lathe and be a machinist. So a friend from the, at that point, I had met Yvain, my wife, Mistress Yvain, who, I mean, now we're both Laurels. Met her while I was a student at K-State, because I happened to go to a, war maneuvers in Nebraska. I went to a war maneuvers, and she lived in Magmore, and so we just day tripped up there. I thought it was much farther than it was. Long story short, short story long, anything by Dickens. Here I am, and I'm rambling and I'm rambling. I remember where I am now. I remember. So after living in Magmore for a few years, we moved to Wyverncliff. This young lady, Eleanor de Moreland, was looking at leaving her job, working for the Methodist Ministries. And so she said, hey, Yvain, would you be interested in this job? I think you'd be good for it. And so Yvain got the job. We moved to, we didn't move to Columbia at first. We moved to Wyverncliff, and we lived in Eleanor and Colin's basement, which Eleanor is in right now, and it is amazing. Saying we lived in their basement is completely misleading because it's amazing. It's not
I've been there. It's its own apartment.
It's fully furnished. It has glass doors. You can walk out onto the deck. It's beautiful. So we lived there for a few years, and I got put on second shift, working for a die stamping company in Moberly. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of backstory, but the thing is, I was a machinist. I liked my job so much in a place called Lincoln, Magmore, that I quit my job to go to school full-time so I could learn to be a machinist. Got myself an associate's degree in machine tool technology in kind of record time because I was just jumping in there and being serious about it because I wanted to learn to make my own tools. The big reason I wanted to learn to make my own tools is because I broke so many tools when I was in school, and I wanted to be able to make my own tools. So once I was in second shift and basically in prison, only hadn't done anything wrong, I just kind of decided, you know, I'm just going to start making tools on company time so that I can teach chasing or repousse. Because I can't teach repousse if I'm the only one with a hammer. So I had to make a bunch of chasing hammers. And I can't teach repousse if I only have one set of punches. So I had to make more punches. So that's when I started teaching chasing and repousse, is when I started building my own tools on company time around 2000, 2001, while living in Standing Stones. Completely cut off from the SCA because I was working second shift. And so all of my work caught up to me right at the point that we decided, you know what? Standing Stones is a college town with no future for us. We're either going to move to Forgotten Sea or we're going to go to Three Rivers. So I put out feelers in both Kansas City and St. Louis. And I've been in St. Louis now since 2005. And it wasn't much longer after I moved to Three Rivers that I was announced for the Laurel, because I had been teaching repousse, which no one in Calontir had ever seen before. And
Right.
so the
So
reason,
I have a question.
yes,
How did you put together your curriculum for your first class?
for my first class, it's not that much different from what I have now, because I based it on what I had done in school. I decided that, okay, the one thing that everyone can get their heads around in the SCA is award medallions. And making them on like a little 2-inch square format is ideal for making a very small weekend repousse piece. So I would make line art and copy it out and let people use the line art onto their metal piece. And then after it gets transferred, we scribe all of the lines, and it wasn't a curriculum so much as a how-to. My goal was, if I can't be physically present to teach the class, I want my handout to take the person reading it through the entire process of this is what it takes to do chasing repousse, with very few additions over the years. My handout, which I will get to later because I have a PDF online. I now have it available so that anyone can get it without having to send me an email or anything silly like that. I'm a complete Luddite when it comes to digital things, unless we're talking about 3D modeling and 3D printing, and then that's like the one thing I know something about.
So when you were teaching your classes in the beginning, a lot of people are daunted by being a teacher, by teaching classes. What is the hardest part for you of teaching classes, of teaching repousse in particular?
Yeah. So before I got into the SCA, I was an extremely shy, nerdy kid. Now I'm a somewhat outgoing, nerdy adult. But my first semester of school, other students would come to me and ask me for help. And they would say, "How are you doing that? Can you show me how to do that?" And I'd say, "I'm just doing this. I don't know." And they say, "But you're doing." And I said, "This is my first time though. I've never done this before, but what you're doing is working." Okay, all right, fine. So because I was approached as an instructor from my first semester of school as a freshman, I became a teacher because for me, giving the answer of, "I don't know," was not sufficient for me because I wanted to be someone who knew something about something else. And I didn't want to feel like an idiot when people would ask me, "So, how do you do that thing that you do all day long?" "I don't know."
So what you're saying is that in the beginning, you learned how to teach by just answering the questions.
I learned how to teach because other people looked to me as an instructor. And that's what happened. I would say the most difficult thing for me as a teacher is the most difficult thing for me as a teacher is not caring more than the student about their grade. I'm also a teacher in real life. I associate teach at a community college here in St. Louis, Florissant Valley, where I teach computer control and manual mill and lathe operation and programming. The most difficult thing for me is when I can't get something across, no matter how many times I try. And something that I've had to grapple with is that there are some people who are natural tool users, and there are some people who aren't natural tool users. And some of the friends that I love more than anything on this planet, who are incredibly capable people, don't do hand tools well. And that is tough for me because it makes sense to me. And so being able to be that different in my approach to have to change how I think, to say, well, okay, let me think of how I can put this in terms that will work for you so you won't be completely disheartened and discouraged. That's the most important thing, is when I feel like I fail as a teacher.
That makes sense. I can see that. I can see that. So tell me also, what are some of the best parts of teaching Repousse?
The best part about teaching Repousse is the best part about teaching, bar none, and it's getting to see that light go off, where the student says, oh wow, I am seeing a glimmer of what is possible. This is amazing. And being able to take that Prometheus fire spark and give it to someone else and pass it along is the best feeling in the world, as far as I'm concerned. Getting to be the person who gives someone else the gift of being able to make things that are important to them, that are physical, that are real world things, and not just an idea in the head. To me, that is the most gratifying thing about being an instructor, no matter what your flavor is.
I agree. I agree. It's really to know that you've given somebody else the ability to create something that makes them happy is a pretty amazing thing. Right now, I'm going to pause for questions again. If you have a question, go ahead and unmute yourself. Go ahead and put it in chat. If you're watching on Facebook Live, go ahead and put it there. We're going to next go through some other things about tools and stuff. So if you have any questions now, please give them. No? All right. Oh, wait, we've got one. Oh, we're losing Soleil. She's heading off to another Zoom. So, but that's the only thing so far. All right, so let's move on then. Which piece of work is your favorite or your best, or are they the same thing?
So, no. That Eleanor is showing one of my pieces that I made upon the occasion of her elevation to the Order.
That might be her favorite.
It might be her favorite.
I mean, these might be my favorite.
That is one of the other things that is really gratifying for me is being able to give something to someone else and have it mean something to them. That is very nice.
Actually, I have a question on that's coming from Facebook Live.
Oh, okay.
Do you have any apprentices?
That is a tricky question. I have only ever had 3 apprentices in my SCA career. 2 of them have been elevated to the Order of the Laurel. 1 of them is also a Pelican. My 3rd apprentice, my middle apprentice, is technically still my apprentice, but I don't know that he will ever return to the SCA. So I do have an apprentice, but
that's Skilldolf?
That is Skilldolf, Skilldolf Finning. He is an internationally famous game developer, and he is one of the 3 guys with Greater Than Games. And it would be silly to ask him to spend a bunch of time with the SCA when he is busy making a real difference, making things that are fun for other people, and to make everyday existence a little bit more fun and enjoyable. So as Volkmar Katzbalger told me, GPA before SCA. And so real life always comes before SCA. It's really difficult for an artist to not price themselves out of the SCA when they get so competent with what they do that suddenly they can't really afford to do work for the SCA because no one can afford them anymore.
Right. I've seen that happen to a couple people.
Yep.
It happens. All right.
But
So,
I would like to share the piece that I'm currently most pleased with, because part of the reason that I keep making things and I keep trying to do better and better every time is because I'm never satisfied with anything that I do. As soon as I make something, I think, wow, that was kind of neat. And then I look at it a couple months later and think, oh, I could have done better. I should have done better. Wow, that's kind of embarrassing now. I don't want to look at that. There are a few things that haven't quite done that, but I will take us briefly to my website via a share screen, where I will share my screen, doink, and share. So
there we go. It's working.
okay, so this is my gallery. My website is sledgehamster.com. The sledgehamster is a piece of steel, and honestly, that is kind of fun. I might have to change my answers before I gave it and say, honestly, the sledgehamster is kind of fun. That was a 6-pound chunk of steel, roughly ground into the shape of like a gummy bear type of hamster with a drifted eye. It's built exactly like a real sledgehammer should be. It's hardened, it's tempered, Rockwell 55, and it's a piece of S7 steel. It is ridiculously tough. I sold it in an auction as a fundraiser for the National Ornamental Museum. But the thing that I'm currently most pleased with as far as chasing Repousse is this piece that I made for my one-time apprentice, Dama Utweiler, who is a laurel and also a pelican. And so on the occasion of his admittance to the Order of the Pelican, I found an image that Albrecht Dürer had drawn and turned it into this badge, which is roughly 2 inches square on a side. So this is some of the best detail I've ever gotten. I apologize for how washed out the image is. I don't apologize for the watermark, because that's how I make sure that people will find out that they stole my stuff, and they'll know where to go when they say, wow, look at this cool thing that I found on Pinterest. We do have the back view, which has the little fibula that I made for it, has a little catch. And then, you can see the other side where all the backside hammering is done. When I made this piece, I kept track of all the punches that I'd done. I will stop the share. Did that stop the share?
Yes, yes,
Good.
you're good.
Okay. So I just had a thought, and then it disappeared from me. Yes, while I was working on the piece, I kept track of all the tools that I was using during the process of making that piece. And I laid them all out on my bench. And then after I was done, I used the remaining punches to say, these will be my punches 7 through 12 that I need for all my little tiny picky details. So my 1 through 6 punches, and that is all His Majesty Lucian's fault that I sell punches today. Lucian took one of my Repousse classes at a metal and glass symposium, and he said, how much do you want for your punches? And I said, they're not for sale. I only have enough for my students. If I buy the punches from you, you'll have money to make more punches for your students. Okay.
He's pretty logical like that sometimes.
He is both logical, pragmatic, and realistic, which is a very dangerous combination for an artist. So that's why Lucian is amazing. So Lucian got me selling my 1 through 6 set of punches, and it wasn't until this last year I was going to debut the 7 through 12 punches at Gulf Wars, and then the COVID. So here we are, meeting remotely because there's a pandemic going on, and we're not allowed to see each other because we are trying to kill the virus.
So when you made this last one for Damo, how much research went into that?
So research, is a funny thing. Depending on what I'm doing, a lot of things I do are for SEA purposes. So for an SEA thing, depending on what I'm doing, I will mostly do Google image searches for specific things. I will usually look at woodcuts. In this case, this was from it was a print that also had an ink wash. I will look at engravings. I will look at paintings. I will look at folios. I will look through museum collections. I will look at extant pieces. This one in particular was just, I did a search for pelican, I think maybe in her piety, 15th century, something like that. First pop up, okay, I take that back. Full disclosure, my wife, Mistress Yvain, found the image and said, I think this is what you want to do for Damo. And I looked at it and said, yeah, you're dead right. That's what I'm doing for Damo. I still had to go through and do a little bit more research, but that is what it took. Sometimes it's saying, hey, Yvain, I want to make a thing. And that leads me to what I absolutely in my heart of hearts believe is the best way to succeed as an artist, whether it's in the SCA, it's to make money professionally, or just for your own satisfaction. The best way to be an artist of any kind is to have a crew. There's a fellow by the name of Brandon Sanderson, who is a professional writer, New York Times bestseller, and all this other kind of stuff. And when he was at wherever he went for school, he now teaches at BYU University. But when he was learning to write, he and like 6 other people started a writing group, just like Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and all the other people who are highly successful, and we still remember 100 more years ago. Okay, fine, it's more like 70 or more years ago. But they took the idea of a writing group, implemented it, and out of their group of 30 from school, 6 of them now make their livings as professional writers, which is incredible. I don't have that same kind of claim. No one in my group of other professional, semi-professional artists that I respect, but what I do have is a small crew of people that every time I work on a project, I take them through the steps. And this all started when I bought a house that was built in 1900 and decided to prove to the world that I wasn't just sitting on my ass at home eating bonbons. And so I started taking photographs and saying, this is what we had. This is what I did. Here's how to do it. And I started this. It was only going to be a before and after, and it became a how-to. And so that's how I've started approaching.
You mean you started teaching again?
Yes and no. I mean, I've tried to always keep teaching, but I try to do it online as much as in real life, and or as I call it, meet space. Right now we're in cyberspace, but I also try to do things in meet space.
Yeah.
So, but have a group of people that you can talk to, share your ideas with, who will give you good criticism that is both honest. A little bit of brutality is not a bad thing, because they have to be willing to tell you, this is a terrible idea, you shouldn't do it, this is a mistake. And if 5 out of 6 people tell you, you shouldn't try that, maybe you shouldn't, but if it's really important to you, you might have to fight for how to prove to those people that, no, this really is a good idea, and let me show you why. So if you have a group of people that you can count on, who can be your crew, who always have your back and you have their back, and you're all constantly giving feedback to each other, that's how you end up with successful art, because you will never get to say, this is my first idea, oh, that's beautiful, yeah, go with that. No way to improve on it. someone will say, have you thought about this? What if you did that? And that can be a dangerous path to go down, but it can also lead to much better ideas if you are getting real-time feedback, so that before the piece goes out of the shop, you've already gotten all the judging and the criticism before you give your piece to the world.
That's a really good point. Having that people that you trust to give you honest answers about your work before you actually put it out there for the masses is
it's a two-way street. You have to be willing to give them feedback as well and support them and say their names and shout them to the heavens. And it's all about, it's not all about networking, but networking is really important.
It is. And not only, and also be willing to give them the same type of feedback back that they're willing to give to you.
Right.
And that's hard. It is hard. Sometimes being honest or being a little bit different is difficult.
We're recording and everything. Is there something that I need to do?
No, I was just checking to see if you were done or not.
Oh, I'm not done yet, but I am still alive. So there's that.
Okay.
Thank you, Eva. Okay.
We're almost done. We are running just a little over, so we should we should start moving forward. So what tools did you use to create your last project?
So I decided that, to be completely honest, what I had to do was go through the entire list. And as far as that goes, it's taken me 27 years to get to the point where I am right now. That's not to say I didn't have what I needed well before then. It probably was about 6 or 8 years before I had mostly everything that I needed to really get it done. Because I mean, the first 6 years I was completely relying on school facilities, and why not? For my last project, need is a strong word, but a pencil or a computer and printer, depending on whether you do your designs digitally or analog. Although if you can scan your images and after you do them, it's great to be able to size as you need to, so you're not drawing directly on the metal, but you can do that. My first 5 years, I 100% drew things on the metal directly, which is
so
not the most efficient way to do it.
What do you use to draw onto the metal directly?
Oh, I'd use a Sharpie. And because of how my instructor had taught me, I do it all left, right, backwards. So I'd always start from the back and then go to the front. And now, because I did a little bit of research and decided, what the hell, what do I have to lose? I started drawing my drawings exactly as I want them, transferring them onto the metal, gluing them down, scribing in with the knife what I want, lightly chasing my first impression, and then when I flip it over,
what kind of a knife do you use to scribe it in?
Well, a number 11 X-Acto blade, something that won't completely tear the paper, but will more slice it. A standard scribe will tend to just tear the paper, which is unfortunate because that's the good medieval way.
And then putting the paper onto the metal, what type of glue do you use to do that?
I use rubber cement. I'll use the scribe with a knife. I have my punches. I have my chasing hammer, my pitch pot, my sandbag, a good bench and a stool with adequate lighting, a pickle pot, which is like, I use a crock pot. Having running water is nice. Having some towels, having a torch, having fire bricks, tongs. You can use the same bench for everything, but it's nice if you can have a separate station where you're not necessarily hammering on the same place where you're using your fire, but you can make do. One of the people that I have the most respect for, Richard Maudsley, who was also an instructor at SIU Carbondale, that I met through going to repair days at the Metal Museum in Memphis, Tennessee. Richard Maudsley has pieces in the Smithsonian and a number of other prestigious places. He's the most down-to-earth person you've ever met in your life. his studio, he had to share it with the laundry room in his apartment because there wasn't room when he was first married to have any place for a studio other than in the laundry room. So he had a little bench that would go over the washer and dryer where you could do everything. So that's why he worked in miniature, because he was limited in space to what he could do. And so he just did amazing things in miniature.
Huh. So, did you learn something when you were making the pin for Damo, the medallion for Damo? Something that you didn't already know?
Most of what I learned on this particular project was just how much movement I could get out of the metal in the fewest number of courses possible. Now, the other thing was how much of a pain it is to work in nickel silver instead of sterling or fine silver. If I'd had it took me like 5 or 6 times longer to do it in nickel silver. And granted, it's like armor grade. He can almost not destroy it, and that's almost but not quite a challenge. But honestly, it's well nigh indestructible. But I could have done it in a fifth of the time if I'd done it in silver, which, depending on if I really had a turnover and if I were making my living as an artist, which I'm not. My wife makes all the money so that I can have fun being an artist in my spare time. If I'd been looking purely from an hourly rate, I would have gone with sterling instead, because I would have had it done in a fraction of the time. It would have looked almost the same. It would have looked better because silver. And I could have been working on the next thing.
So are there particular metals? Obviously, you said sterling works better than nickel sterling. Are there particular metals you recommend to people who are just starting out?
I would recommend copper, just the regular sheet copper that you can get. That is nothing special, nothing fancy. I can't remember what any of the designations are anymore. I like to work in 18 gauge. Most people prefer to work in 20 gauge or thinner. I don't like working anything thinner than 24 gauge. I find that a little thin, unless I'm just going to do stamping like Catalina's earrings. And then those are closer to like 30 gauge, just so I can get the pressing to take.
You can see them. I'll talk so you guys can see.
Yeah, not bad.
There you go.
So copper is going to work the closest to sterling. It is the most forgiving metal that there is as far as the art jewelry metals go that are also considered base metal. As far as other copper alloys, yellow brasses and red bronzes, anything that has like some kind of a zinc or a tin content will work just fine. And then that'll give you a couple of color variations that you can use to give yourself some options. And then they'll take oxidations differently. But copper is what I recommend for getting started and learning as much as you can before you take your $100 bill or whatever it's going to be of silver and just say, okay, I'm just going to start hitting it with hammers and hope I don't tear it and have to melt it down and roll it back out. And oh boy.
Good luck with that. So do you learn something every time you make something new?
Absolutely. Even if I can't articulate what it is, muscle memory is a real thing. And every time that you make something again, even if it's repetition and production work, you will find out how to do things quicker, how to do them more efficiently, and how to do them better. And so just having that kind of personal challenge of how can I do the same thing that I just did 100 times better than the last time in less time, you're learning every time you make something. And it's really that understanding the materials in such a way that you don't have to consciously think about it, but you can just look at it and get the immediate feedback. You're still making micro calculations, but you're not thinking about it in words. You're just looking at it and thinking, oh, do that. Oh, hey, look, now it works. Look at that. That's my approach to my punches. I've ground over 1,000 punches at this point, and I do it almost without thinking. I just look at what I'm doing, and then somehow I'm done, and I didn't screw it up.
So what would you tell young 18-year-old Grimwulf about metalworking?
I would tell a young Grimwulf to do more drawings. I would tell him to pay more attention, learn as much as you possibly can about artistic disciplines that don't at first seem to relate to metalworking. And don't be an art bully. Young Grimwulf was an art bully. He really was. Mistress Eleanor did not like for me to be anywhere near her when she would work on a project because she felt incredibly intimidated by me. She's nodding her head. And I never meant to be that, but there's some things that you just can't help how you feel about your friends and your heroes. And so I have tried to make a more conscious effort to not be as overbearing, be a little bit more, a kinder and gentler Grimwulf.
We're all trying to do that in these days, I believe.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. What would you tell young Grimwulf about his future in the SCA?
I would tell Grimwulf, you are doing just fine. You don't need to worry about it. Making friends and inspiring others to discover the world around is the most important thing. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about being a teacher. The greatest thing that you can do is give someone else the gift of confidence, and I would say compassion is also important, but competence. Giving someone else what they need to feel like they can do what you do. That's do more of that.
And what are your current projects? What are you working on right now?
So I'm always working on at least a dozen things at once. I always have things on the back burners. But what I'm actively working on right now, more than anything else, is I decided to get into FDM printing. And so I have a printer in my basement running as often as I can. I'm currently making these ear protectors. And so they have little grabby grabbers on them.
For
You can
masks.
put it on the back of your head. And so they'll grab the hooks on your face mask so that you don't have all the strain on your ears. And so I have started to personalize them. That one has, it's a tooth with magnolia petals for my dentist, Magnolia Dental. And so I have, in the last day or two, made 14 of those, and they're going everywhere. So I'm going to have Elaine give those out on Monday to the dentist when she goes to the dentist. And then my gym that I was telling you about that does only the training, they had this stopwatch logo. So I'm going to give that to them. And I've come up with around 10 of those with their logo. Because getting those little things that seem more personal, like your earrings and Eleanor's brooch, that means so much to people. And being able to give that little thing, and people know that you went to just a little bit of extra effort, even if they have no idea how it was done, that means so much to people, to get something that someone else put effort into and then personally gave to them. Here you go. That is one of the most amazing things that can be done.
That's wonderful. It really is. That's a really neat thing to be doing. All right, so right now we're going to take a pause to see if anybody has any questions about
Okay.
tools or Repousse in general. We're going to be wrapping it up pretty soon, so this is
Okay.
your chance.
So
Anyone?
Grimwulf,
Yes.
if it makes you feel any better, while you were terribly intimidating to be around when I was working on a project, I recently had a conversation with Anna Nikolaevna Petrakova, who is
Mhm.
somebody that we both knew down in Graynish. And she used to yell at me for doing to her exactly what I felt like you were doing to me. So I think that might just be an artisan thing.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's a Graynish thing. I'm not sure, but whatever it was, you weren't the only one doing it, apparently.
It's probably a number of factors. Seeing your friends, doing things that you don't know how to do, doing them tolerably well, and then having to basically perform in front of them. That's incredibly intimidating. And so you don't want someone else to see your process, because then you think, oh God, they're going to see me make these mistakes. And so a lot of that can also fall back to imposter syndrome, which everyone that I know has it to some degree. You feel like you are just faking your way through, and that you hope that no one finds out that you don't really know as much as they think you do, but you're doing the best that you can and you're trying. So if you can help someone else out, maybe it'll be okay.
It's a
Absolutely.
thing. It's a thing. I've been teaching some dance classes recently, and I've been very shy to post what I've been doing publicly because I'm still learning, and it's hard. It's hard to put it out there. So,
Oh,
all
yeah.
right. Any other questions or comments or? All right. So
You're
I have
great.
one. Oh, what?
I just wanted to mention that one of the things that Master Grimwulf hadn't said, but I found personally to be incredibly valuable with him as a teacher was just to have space to have conversations. We spent a lot of time just talking, and you know, it wasn't always about art. It wasn't always about what we were working on. It was about things. And having that ability to just sort of bounce life off of someone who you respect, and especially someone as talented as Grimwulf, really will make a huge difference in someone's life. You know, both as a person, as in the SCA, and as a craftsperson, etc. So as a teacher, giving someone space to talk and to have a conversation is super important, and he does it spectacularly well. So thank you.
All right. That's so true. Just those times when you could just sit and have a conversation with people, really, it helps you to get to know someone and make friends. And it's something that happens when you just take the time to hang out with somebody. Like, give them your time. What's more valuable?
That leads me to your last question that I think you need to ask.
I do. I said, so we all have some sort of magic that keeps us here, that gives us joy, that brings us back when we're on the brink of what we all call the dreaded burnout. Can you share with us a magical SCA moment that you can reminisce on to spark your joy when it's feeling thin?
Absolutely. And it is from my very first event, Black Axe. Before I knew how to do anything in the SCA, before I knew how to swing a hammer. So as I said, I was doing SCA medieval dancing. And at some point, after midnight, I don't know. I mean, because you go through the whole thing. You've had this entire day, and then we're just dancing and dancing and dancing into the wee hours of the night. And I sat down on a park bench because it's Meridian, so it's at a state park of some kind. And there's a fellow by the name of Gareth Gwyneth, who I'm an 18-year-old kid, and this fully grown man who has been teaching dance sits down and just talks to me. And we just talked about life, the universe, and everything. But it meant so much to me that someone would take their time. They could be in there having fun, talking to their friends, instead of talking to me, the 18-year-old kid who just fell off the newbie truck. But that he spent his time and spoke with me meant the absolute world to me. He later became a laurel for dance, and he is unfortunately no longer alive. I think it's also important for me to say that he was one of the only Black people on site. He was from a shire of Thorngill, Montgomery, Alabama. And so the one Black guy on site is talking to me, and it made my day. And it still makes my day 27 years later. And I carry that with me. It meant a lot that he would share his time with me.
It's a thing, time. Like, it's the most valuable commodity any of us have. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for sharing your story with us, your journey through metalworking. I always adore talking to you. And I really want to thank everyone for joining us as well. God, I'm a little teary-eyed. So I want to say here that next week we'll be doing this again. I have Mistress Marie Lefavre joining us next Saturday to talk about her journey with pottery. So if you have the time to come and join us, we would really appreciate it. It'll be very similar format to what we did this week, a little bit about her early times, a little bit how she got into it, and then a little bit about the work itself. So again, that'll be next Saturday at 4 p.m. Thank you again, Master Grimwulf. Thank you everyone for being here.
Yay. Thanks everybody.